Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello, welcome to the RTÉ GAA Podcast. Mikey Stafford here. I'm joined ahead of the biggest football weekend of the year, as always, by Rory O'Neill, by Ciaran, Whelan, and by Eamonn Fitzmaurice. How's everybody doing?
Good, Mikey.
Not about it.
Mikey, thanks.
Good stuff, lads. Yeah, look, it's a exciting weekend, obviously. Look, it's the All-Ireland football quarterfinals. Since these were made, double headers on a Saturday and Sunday, it's the first chance you get really for Croke Park to be full or close to full. They're looking at, what is it, Roy, about 130,000 probably over the 2 days?
I think they're going to get about 75 on Sunday and potentially maybe 55 or 60 then on the Saturday.
Yeah.
No, so Derry, Mayo and Dublin. Derry, Mayo, Dublin and Armagh obviously help,
Yes, big time.
Regards, because you wouldn't be depending on Cork or Kerry for that matter, actually, Eamonn.
No, not for a quarter final. No, they're like
somewhere between 500 and 1,000, I suppose, from Kerry up there, Rory.
Yeah, they're the Naomi Campbell of supporters. They don't get out of bed for quarterfinals, really. No. But so look, for anybody who's not aware, Saturday is Clare v Derry, Dublin v Cork, and Sunday is Armagh, Galway, and Kerry v Mayo. And as we know, the way the semi-finals work out, the winners of Dublin Cork will play the winners of Kerry Mayo, and the winners of Clare Derry will play the winners of Armagh Galway, which is obviously for everybody is quite interesting because it means one of Clare, Derry, Armagh and Galway is going to contest an All-Ireland final, which will be quite novel after the last 15 or so years. Anyway, we'll crack on with the Saturday matches first. That's the fiesta of Division 2 football as Clare take on Derry and Dublin take on Cork. It's true, Whelo. It might only be for 12 months.
I am Mikey. Listen, enjoy a while it lasts.
Yeah,
You get every dig you can in possible.
I don't know how many digs the Dubs are going to get in this weekend, so we might as well start there. Have you any concerns whatsoever going into this game, Whelo, as a Dublin fan?
No, not particularly. I don't think, Mikey. No, I think
no straight answer.
I suppose that like Cork are probably, the draw has been kind to them to a certain degree. Now, I would give Cork, you have to give them credit where credit is due. That John Cleary has, he's instilled a bit of fight into them. They came out of the league and they were getting they're the most maligned team and they've taken a hell of a lot of criticism, and it must be actually difficult to be a Cork player in recent years, and they were taking a lot of flack during the league, and they came out of the Kerry game with a bit of pride, and then kicked on to get a couple of wins in the qualifiers, even though they weren't electric against Limerick, but they still got the job done. So to be honest, I always felt if this game had been in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, it would have brought a bit of energy to it. It would have rallied maybe the home crowd. Cork would have had a bit of support there, but Croke Park is a different, they're not going to travel. Dublin will have support. Dublin look to have the bit back between their teeth. Even though they remain untested and there's probably some question marks still hanging out there that we haven't got answers to, they look like they've regenerated a bit, and particularly in their forward line. I thought the way they set up in the forward line and their movement, particularly the inside three and how the shape they had the last day against Clare was excellent. They blew them out of the water. So, you got to think that Dublin are going to win this game with a bit of comfort. I think for Cork, it's really about containment, and I would expect to see them set up similarly to the Kerry game. Now obviously Sean Powter, they seem to be using him in that extra role. You probably think he might be best suited to mark Con O'Callaghan, but they'll probably play him in that +1. Try and play deep. Try and have Mcguire dropping into the half back line. Can play a game of containment, and if they can move the ball quicker, their transition can be slow. But if they can get it quicker into Sherlock, O'Mahony, and Hurley, they could cause Dublin some problems up there. But you got to feel that Dublin have had 4 weeks. They took a week off after the Leinster final. They will be fresh, they'll be energised, and even I think psychologically for Cork, the challenge of just coming into Croke Park against this Dublin team is going to be just beyond them, I think, Mikey.
Yeah. Eamonn, Cork did well for a brief period against Kerry, I suppose, and as Ciaran says, they have a method of containment they're obviously been working on. The problem for John Cleary is he hasn't been working on a method of containment when playing against Louth and Limerick. So, you know, whatever kind of momentum they've got through the qualifiers, unfortunately, is likely to be kind of irrelevant going into this game, because they'll have to change their style of play, because they can't treat Dublin as they treated Louth or Limerick. So they'll have to go back somewhat to how they played down in the Munster final, which was, you know, effective for 50 or 60 minutes perhaps against a Kerry team who hadn't hit their straps. Unfortunately, the Dublin attack got plenty of practice in the Leinster final against Kildare, so they could be in a bit of a flow. So this is going to be a challenge above, the Munster semi-final for Cork, isn't it?
It is. Look, I think all of that is fair, Mikey, and I think Ciaran covered it well there. Look, with Cork, I think today against Kerry, they did very well for that 50 minutes or so, and you know they were
down to 14 men for the last 10 minutes as well when Kerry ran in 5 or 6 points. You know, so I don't know how much of a factor that was. I mean, obviously they were going to lose the match anyway, but you know, I just think that got lost the small bit. I felt
it did, Rory, and I think the other point as well with that period was that, look, they've been very unlucky with injuries, and the injuries they've got have been big, significant injuries all throughout the season. And it was kind of summed up with the injury Micheál Martin picked up in that in that Munster semi-final game, where he had to go off, and a fellow who's used to playing outfield for his club ends up going into goals. Kerry get a press going for the last, you know, when David Moran came on the field in particular, and they really hemmed them in and went to town on them for the last, you know, 20 minutes of the game. And as you mentioned, Rory, they were down to 14 players. So there was a lot that went against Cork towards the end of that game. But I think Kerry were always going to win it. And, you know, there was no question. It didn't look to me ever like Kerry were going to lose that game. But Cork have a template from that game. They'll have the policy of containment again against Dublin. And I think if I was in the Cork camp, if looking at Dublin, I was at the Leinster final, they were so impressive up front, and it was clear they were enjoying kicking the ball inside, and the whole team were enjoying it. They were enjoying, you know, over the way their game had evolved to the possession game. You know, it was very effective, but there probably isn't much fun in playing that, whereas playing that kicking, attacking game that they played, using Con inside, using Costello and Dean Rock, getting the likes of Kilkenny, cutting off them, getting those goal chances and getting some great scores. It was a joy to watch, but I'm sure it was a joy to play as well. So they've probably been practicing that for the last couple of weeks as well. And Cork certainly need to station at least one, if not two bodies in that kind of area around the D to take away those kick passes and force Dublin to go back to the other game and frustrate them, and maybe get Dublin playing in a way that they're quite comfortable with, but at the same time isn't as enjoyable to play and possibly isn't as effective as well. So, you know, I think that's probably the approach Cork are going to have to take. But like Ciaran mentioned, that containment game is fine if you transition at the pace that the likes of Derry do. But Cork are kind of slow enough getting from back to front, and, you know, Dublin will be comfortable dealing with that. So big challenge for Cork, but at the same time, I do think while it's not meant to be condescending, they are in bonus territory. They were at a point in their season where they had to play a game to ensure that they didn't go down to Division 3. And they got the result against Offaly that day. And now they're in an All-Ireland quarter-final. Could have been a very different conversation for them for this season. So at least they're building experience for themselves going forward. But, you know, like Ciaran, very hard to see anything other than a comfortable Dublin win, really.
Yeah. John Cleary has kind of been building, you know, Rory, he's wanted this job obviously for a while, and he won't be happy with kind of how it's kind of come to him now. But for all the kind of flack they've got, you know, they've got some fantastic footballers. You know, Mcguire was mentioned already in Powter, and Stephen Sherlock has run hot at times this season, and Brian Hurley is consistent. Cathal O'Mahony is kind of come through this year and looks very good. You know, he's an experienced manager. He's on the biggest stage against the biggest team. he has some very talented footballers. Maybe doesn't have as many as Dublin, but you'd like to think the man's going to have a plan, and he's going to hopefully, kind of implement it better than it was implemented against Kerry, and keep 15 players on the pitch. And I'm not saying they're going to win, but is there any optimism that this could be a heartening performance to build on for the next few years?
Yeah, and I think there is. I think they will. No self-respecting Cork man coming up to Dublin to play Dublin isn't obviously not going to lift his game a small bit with facing into that challenge, but they're just not good enough. Let's be honest, they're not athletically at the same level as Dublin. They don't have the same depth and the panel. They're probably a little bit weak at midfield. I'd imagine they're going to find it very, very difficult to secure that first phase ball, primary possession. Ian Mcguire, great player. He's got Colin O'Callaghan in alongside him at the minute, who's, let's be honest, is more of a wing forward, sort of half forward than a midfielder, and he's only kind of in there as an auxiliary midfielder because Cillian O'Hanlon went out on long-term injury, and they don't really have any other options bar a young lad, which we saw on Munster in the 20s, young lad Walsh from Canturk. But probably, Eamonn, you mentioned him as well to me in a text, probably a bit too soon and maybe a bit underdeveloped from his point of view. So look, I think they will, bonus territory is a good way of looking at it. The reality here is you're coming up to play a team away from home. I know Wheeler doesn't like this now, but that's the reality. You're playing them in their home venue. They've lost 3 matches in 12 years. 3 championship matches in 12 years they've been beaten in. None of which were Kerry, by the way. Kerry in that run over the last 12 years on 6 occasions, and Eamonn will probably know this better than most because he was probably manager for at least 5 of them.
He's having to cut out both of you, lads.
Jesus Christ, Rory.
Yeah,
you got out the wrong side of the bed this morning.
Yeah, I did actually. But I think you have to put in context.
The rebels coming out in them.
Not at all. I think you have to put in context. It's not
3
necessary.
of them, I think, Rory. 3 of mine responsible. I'm just doing my counting there. 3.
I can see you wincing, Eamonn.
I thought it sounded a bit too much, Mikey. I just had to do my maths.
So, I think the challenge that Cork are facing needs to be put into context a small bit, and the ridicule that seems to accompany them everywhere they go, and will probably ensue if they endure an 8 to 10 point beating, because they're an easy punch bag for teams. But the reality is, this is a challenge way beyond them in their development at this point. You just hope that they can make it competitive. They'll rise to the challenge a small bit, and they'll give a good account of themselves, so that when they can face into 2023 again, that they get a few players back. Conor Corbett and a few others will be fit, we hope, and that they can make a real stab at being with Dublin, the other team that gets out of Division 2, get back to Division 1, and then try and establish yourself at the top.
Hopefully draw Dublin at home in Páirc Uí Chaoimh at least next spring.
Yeah.
We'll look forward to that.
It'd be great, Mikey. At least we'll be back at home in Perennial for our league games next year. We'll be back playing our home venue.
I won't bother doing predictions here. I think we're all predicting a Dublin win. So I just ask you, is there any, Dublin, obviously, they've come through Leinster fairly handy. Wexford, Meath, Kildare, it's a pretty standard 3 victims for them at this stage, and Kildare, obviously, for a variety of reasons, didn't put up much of a challenge in the Leinster final. What do you think at this stage Dublin need to where are you maybe a little bit concerned about what you've seen thus far, and what would you like to see against Cork? All things considered, the result is beyond doubt at this stage.
Yeah, I suppose there's probably 3 things, and I suppose we touched on one already, is kind of the movement in the forward line, and Eamonn touched on it there as well, that the 3 lads they were playing very, very deep, really deep, nearly on the end line, and making it very, very difficult to defend against. And playing very narrow. The 3 inside forwards were playing right on the goal line, and that makes it actually, even if you have one sweeper back, it can be very, very difficult to play against. So it's going to be interesting to see. They've kind of let that cat out of the bag to a certain degree, and it'd be interesting to see how teams approach that. They obviously have the other method of being able to hold possession and work it and wait and be patient and get runners in at angles as well. But I suppose the two things for me, Mikey, is number one, probably they're lacking a bit of depth defensively, and Owen O'Donnell, was brought into the panel he was brought in for a particular reason, and I think that's because they have a few injuries defensively. I think McDade is obviously.
Is he not a club? Is he not a forward as a club player?
He is a forward as a club player, but inter-county minor he would have played as a half-back when he played at Dublin. So he has that ability to adjust, and it just seems a bit. I think he was brought in. I would think he's been brought in to cover defensively because there isn't a whole lot of depth there. And the second question for me is, and this is in no way building Kerry up, because Kerry are under significant pressure, if Dublin and Kerry were to come through. But when you do look at the bench and you look at the depth that Kerry now would have compared to Dublin, if Dublin are asked that question with 10, 15 minutes to go, or momentum goes against them in that last quarter, they concede a goal like they did in 2019, Killian Spillane, do they have the guys that can come in and hold the composure within the team and close out the game like they did many times over that period? And that's the big question mark. We won't know until they're actually put in that position. So they would be kind of the two kind of, a couple of doubts, that the questions that still aren't answered.
And I think you're on the Dubs, the bench at the moment, the bench going back all the time that I would have been coming up against them, they were built to either go after the game or finish the game. If they were ahead, they put the foot to the floor, or if they were behind, they had the quality to kind of flip it around. But I think the bench now, and holding the likes of Johnny Cooper, it's built to see out a match and manage out a match, that they're ahead going into the final quarter, and that they're kind of, there to manage the game out then, rather than having the likes of the Kevin McMenamins and so on, and the Macaulays and all these fellas that could go and chase games for you.
But I'm sure, Eamon, there was times back then when you looked at that bench and you thought, Jesus, looks what is coming in the last 15, 20 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, you were bringing Dermot Connolly on for the last 15 minutes of All-Ireland finals at times. You know what I mean?
It was unbelievable. And we used to have to plan for the likes of Kevin McMenamin and all of the others, that when they were coming in, we had to react with possibly a sub to pick them up, because having the likes of those fresh fellas coming in and going at tired defenders who've been marking brilliant players for 55, 60 minutes already, it was, you were reacting to them rather than being proactive, which was because of the strength of the bench. That was just the way it was.
There's a pity their bench now isn't stronger. Your heart will bleed from.
Ciaran said you're on fire this morning.
Just one final point. I was looking at it there. I think the starting 15 from Cork, I think 9 of the starting 15, potentially 9 anyway, it'll be their first time to kick a football in Croke Park. And they're going to, as I said, context.
That's fair enough. And look, we were talking about it here on the Hurling Show on Monday, about in the context of Clare and Wexford, how Wexford had the better of Clare until it came to Clare emptied their bench, brought on 3 scoring forwards who all scored, and Wexford's bench just didn't have the impact. And in the end, it was a difference. And in Gaelic games, there's no denying that it's a 20-man game, etc. And that was what made Dublin exceptional, I suppose. So I think we can all clearly see that Cork are going to win this game, because Dublin's bench isn't what it used to be. We'll move on to the first game on Saturday. That's a joke, I'm guessing, unless anybody says otherwise. I think we're all predicting a Dublin win. The first game on Saturday is Clare versus Derry, and Eamon, my biggest concern, I had a look at teams winning runs. Clare come into this on the back of a qualifier run of beating Meath and Roscommon. Derry, lest we forget, because Armagh are now the shiniest penny in Ulster and everything else. Derry won Ulster by beating Tyrone, Monaghan and Donegal. The problem is it'll be nearly a month since they beat Donegal in a game of football that was probably pretty forgettable a day later, never mind a month later. So I think people maybe are beginning. I think they're obviously favourites against Clare, but you see the outright odds for the All-Ireland and pundits talking about their runners and riders, and Armagh are now like streaks ahead of Derry in everybody's estimation. But you can't get away from the quality of the Ulster title that Derry have won, and they've had a month to recover / rest now is one way of looking at it. But or would you be more concerned that perhaps the momentum they build up might have dissipated a bit?
Yeah, we're good at recency bias in the GAA. In fairness, Mikey, whoever is going well at the moment is going to win everything. But no, look, I think with Derry, I think it actually, I would worry for the likes of Kerry with a 4-week break, but Derry, I think it suited them because, it was a huge achievement for them. They were very open afterwards that they were going to enjoy the celebrations and they were going to enjoy the first couple of days of being Ulster champions. And for a new developing team, that kind of bonding and togetherness and having the few pints and the drinks and going around together with the cup and all that, that's brilliant. But they also have plenty of time then as well to get right for the quarter final. I put 2 health warnings with Derry, and I think this weekend will answer us on that. Number one, it was a brilliant Ulster Championship to win, no doubt about it. But when we see where the teams that they beat went afterwards, if you sit down before the Ulster Championship, you say Derry win the Ulster Championship, beating Tyrone, Monaghan and Donegal, you'd say, wow, that's amazing. But having seen what happened to Monaghan, Tyrone and Donegal afterwards, how good were they this season and how good were they in the Ulster Championship? So I think that's one question for Derry. And the other thing is, how well will their game transfer to Croke Park? And I think myself it'll transfer quite well because they're so fit. And Rory Gallagher has the experience of having transferred with Jim McGuinness, the Donegal template to Croke Park and being even better in Croke Park, if anything. So I wouldn't be as worried about that. But I do think that the farm lines, the way that they have played out over the championship, brilliant achievement, but none of Donegal, Monaghan or Tyrone were going as well as they can go this year. So that's the only health warning I'd have with Derry. I still think that they're going to take serious beating this weekend, obviously, and possibly further into the championship. But it will be interesting to see where they're at this Saturday evening.
Yeah, Rory, it might be a bit of a culture shock, I think, for Clare after playing against Meath and Roscommon to come up against this Derry system, which not getting into like aesthetics here because I actually I really enjoy watching them play. I think they're fascinating, but they are. It's a Rory Gallagher team. They like Keelan Sexton can look forward to one of the more uncomfortable and possibly he may count on one hand or 1.5 hands how many times he touches the ball. It's not going to be me. Then it's not going to be Roscommon
anyway.
No, you wouldn't imagine so. So, Colin Collins has been around the block a long time. Obviously, got to look at Derry during the league this year. So, do you think Clare have a chance here? Do you think like that? Because obviously, it's quite the clash of styles, and Derry will be going in as rightly as favourites, I'd imagine.
Yeah, but I think that brings a bit of baggage as well. I mean, they would have been underdogs going into all 3 games thus far. Going into a match as favourites, a very different mindset and huge expectation. There'll be a massive crowd from Derry there from very early on, and wouldn't imagine Clare will have huge support given the fact that they're heading back up to Croke Park the following weekend as well with their hurlers. So I think there's a shift in that pressure. They're coming in as the Ulster champions. They're kind of expected to win. They're going to be expected to win the game comfortably enough. And Colm Collins and Clare, not too dissimilar to Cork, could be classed to be in bonus territory. But I think the big difference between Clare taking on Derry and obviously Cork taking on Dublin is I think Clare have a chance here. I think Eamonn's point is an interesting one. I mean, does that style of football transfer to Croke Park? And if the fact that their fitness levels are at such a high level, it may very well do. Looking at the last round qualifier, Clare do tend to sit off as well. Would that be fair, Eamon? Like, could this be quite I wouldn't necessarily say we're heading back into Donegal, Derry, Ulster final territory, but lads, could this actually be quite a cagey old affair where basically the 2 teams kind of sit back and, there's a lot of...
Big time, Rory. Big time.
So?
Like,
yeah.
Pierce Lillis, is selected nominally wing forward, and he can play there, and he is one of those, again, kind of transition players up and down the field, but he sits in, as pretty much a sweeper, and he tries to protect the inside line, and Clare get plenty of bodies back, and they counter-attack, and then if they're quite happy, I think it's one of the developments in their game this season is that they're happy to hold on to the ball for a while and take the sting out of the game and go at it and attack it then. So, I would expect it to be quite cagey. I wouldn't, I'd expect
and so like
Clare
in that situation, a low-scoring game, I think you always give an underdog a really good chance because anything could happen. Last-minute goal or it's a risky enough game. Like, I mean, I think if Derry actually came out and showed something a little bit different, decided to go after Clare, I think they're probably better than Clare. Yeah. And for Manning, they could probably win the game comfortably. But I don't know. I'm not entirely sure if we'll see them change too much from what we've seen so far.
Well, Whelo in the league, they did kind of cut loose a little bit down at Cusack Park, and they won 2-13 to 10 points away to Clare. So Clare will be on guard. They know obviously that this Derry team are capable of scoring. I know we take the league with a pinch of salt, but at the same time, this kind of notion that Derry are ultra defensive, etc. Kind of, it's they may be very defensive, but they're also very, very capable of ringing up big scores, and particularly they're quite effective at raising green flags as well.
Yeah, listen, they will have benefit from playing them in the league, but what Rory Gallagher showed, I doubt he was shown his championship hand, and I think Derry had to show their championship hand in Ulster to get those victories. And I think getting back to Eamonn's point about the three teams that they bet, I take that, but I think if they were to play those three teams again, would those three teams have learned a lot, because they kind of got caught in that web and uncertainty, and really, or they were caught in the headlights of the Derry system, and you learn a lot from that. So I don't know how much Clare have learned from the game against Derry, but I think that, again, with that 4-week break, I'd fully agree that it really suited Derry because it gave Rory Gallagher the chance to regroup. He had phase 1 completed. He probably had time to really look ahead with detail in phase 2. He's coming to Croke Park. I think their game will. I know people say Croke Park is more open and faster and stuff like that. I think their game plan will be fine in Croke Park. I think they might just defend a little bit narrowly. They might give the side channels a little bit more space down the side channels to Clare, similar to the way Tyrone did last year against Kerry, where they were happy for them to go down the channels down on the sideline and give them that space. And if they kick a score from there, do you know what? Fair play. And I think they'll be well organised and well structured, and they'll do what they usually do, that they will fully dictate the terms of the game and look to, as we know, turn over Clare and hit them on the counter attack. So it really depends. Clare do set up, and they get bodies back. They play a running game. They will slow it down themselves. We will have periods where we'll be kind of scratching our head saying the ball has gone back and forward. But really, I think Clare have to be brave enough to maybe have a go at Derry and ask them questions and get inside that scoring zone, and may not be as conservative as Donegal were. But for me, when you really look at it closely and you think of Brendan Rodgers and Chrissy McCaig and Owen Cleary and Keelan Sexton, and you look possibly at those matchups and you look at the track record those two boys have had in Ulster, if you take them out of the Clare offensive threat, I think they're going to struggle, and that's why I think Derry will be well prepared. Yes, Clare have a chance, but for me, I just think Derry will dictate the terms of the game, and that's what's going to win it for them.
Yeah, the Ulster final, the reason I suppose I found it so compelling was that Derry got that, after an awful opening, Derry got that goal, which kind of gave them an edge for the whole game, and the absolute terror that which both teams had about losing the ball just made every possession seem so pivotal. Even if very little happened except a wide being kicked, it felt like every time each team had the ball, this could be the winning and the losing of the game. I have a feeling that the stakes mightn't be quite so high in terms of possession on Saturday afternoon.
No, and you'd hope that Clare, as Ciaran said there, will have the bit of a go, Mikey, that, I was surprised with how conservative Donegal were that day, because Donegal are at their best when they're coming at pace, playing 1-2s, and you know, they have the athleticism to get up and down the field, even if they lose the ball, but they were so conscious, and obviously it worked so hard in not turning over possession that they took it to levels of paranoia rarely seen before. But like you said, it did kind of add to the spectacle in terms of the intrigue about a turnover seeming so significant. But the one place that I think that Clare will have looked at and will try to get at Derry is Derry's own kickouts, that, you know, they like to go long, or on both kickouts, I suppose, but on their own kickout, Oran Lynch likes to go long, because when they win it, they like to move it up the field quickly. And Clare have Darren O'Neill and Cathal O'Connor in the middle of the field. They're big, strong operators, particularly Darren O'Neill. And if they can get any bit of a foothold at all in terms of winning a couple of kickouts and going at Derry when they're a bit open, that's an opportunity. And similarly, Derry like to press the opposition kickout, so that if they can win their ball and move it on fast, there will be opportunities there. So you'd hope that Clare would be ambitious in those kind of areas. But similar to what Ciaran said, look, you know, I've said it before, I have massive respect for Clare. I came across them a good bit in my own time, and we had a couple of narrow escapes above in Cusack Park, and it's been kind of painted as, oh, you know, we got the job done or whatever. But those games, I remember in 2017, we beat Dublin in the league final, and we played Clare maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks later in the Munster Championship. Donncha Welsh got sent off just before half time. Yeah. I don't know what we were down at halftime. We were 3 or 4 points down at halftime. We were playing into Breeze with 14 men. It was fine and hairy, and it wasn't a kind of, oh, we'll get through this. We played very well in the second half to get through it. So I'd always have great time for Clare, but I think Derry have too much, and I think their game will transfer well to Croke Park, and they'll be hard to stop, not just this weekend, but going forward.
Okay. Rory, how do you see it go?
Yeah, I think well, maybe not so narrow. Yeah. But yeah, look, I think it would be a real massive blow for Rory Gallagher and the whole Derry momentum that came out of the Ulster Championship if they were to slip up at this stage. And I think they'll just have too much in terms of pace and power, and they'll probably sneak it. I'd say by 4 or 5 in the end.
Okay, and Whelo, you also going for a Derry win?
Yeah, I think so. I think, listen, the key for Clare is not to concede early green flags, because that just lets Derry control the game. So if they can force Derry to have to play and come forward and take the more risks they force Derry to take for as long as possible, keep them in the game, in my view. But I just think Derry will dictate the terms and have too much and win by 4 or 5. Yeah.
Okay, right. Moving on to Sunday, Division 1 Sunday. Very sorry, Whelan. Very intriguing. It's they're two great matchups. Let's be honest. I think both days have a lot to offer, but I think there's a lot of excitement around Armagh. Eamonn, as you mentioned, recency bias, and Galway, like Derry, have kind of had a month on the shelf where, for some people, you know, their beautiful attacking football has become all the more beautiful in the reminiscing, and for others, I suppose, old failings perhaps people are thinking are gonna come back to the fore. Do you think, Eamonn, that the 4 weeks has been as useful to Pádraig Joyce as it was to Rory Gallagher?
I don't know, Mikey. Yeah, look, I suppose they had 3 games in the Connacht Championship, and it was a big, again, no more than Derry. It was a big step for them to win the Connacht Championship, and Pádraig Joyce's reign probably needed it. So again, there probably was a bit of elation within the group for the first half of that first week, and again having the chance to kind of settle down and get back into the nitty gritty of getting ready for an All-Ireland quarter final. It was probably no harm for them to have the bit of time again. When you contrast where Armagh are coming from, just with the way that they've played and the momentum that they have coming into the game, it's hard to buy that at this time of the season. It's just hard to get to where Armagh are at. There may be a small bit of fatigue coming off the couple of hard games in the couple of weeks together. That is, a slight factor. Galway are obviously going to be fresher. but the momentum, confidence, and belief that Armagh have, it's coming to the boil perfectly for them at the right time.
Yeah, Rory, kind of you look at the kind of the run that the provincial champions had to get here, and we've mentioned how formidable Derry's was with perhaps a little bit of revisionism. Cork and Limerick for Kerry. We mentioned Dublin's. Galway have already beaten Mayo and Roscommon, so as provincial champions go, they are pretty battle hardened, and Pork Joyce has kind of been toying with his defensive system, obviously quite dramatically against Mayo, and then kind of the light version in later games, and kind of we know what their attack has. So they do offer a very different challenge, I think, to what Armagh have already faced in familiar foes in terms of Tyrone and Donegal.
Yeah, and what impresses me about Galway is they seem to have, they can kind of adapt their game plan depending on who it is depending on the opposition. I mean, they obviously sat back quite deep against it. They obviously, Whelo did a really good piece on the night that they beat Mayo on the nighttime program, just how they sat the two wing forwards back. Very similar, actually. I would suggest, Eamonn, to what you did when you played Donegal in that famous All-Ireland final back in 2014, where you had your two kind of wing forwards kind of sitting back, tracking runners, not too dissimilar in terms of making sure that Mayo, given the power and pace that they have coming from deep. And then obviously they came with something a little bit different in the Connacht final. Obviously Leitrim wouldn't have given them as much of a challenge, but I think this weekend it's going to be a very, very different challenge once again, because of Armagh play a very kind of open, this could be a shootout, or I don't know. I'd be interested in the boys' views. You'd love it if it was. I think from Armagh's perspective, I think the big thing I was just looking there, they haven't played non-Ulster opposition since the middle of March. So I think they'll probably relish going in here. They maybe look for this, this game could potentially be quite open, as I said. And if it is, with both sets of forwards, I think, I think we could be in for an absolute cracker, but it's without a doubt the hardest one of the four games to call.
Yeah, we do occasionally like to look at matchups, and I think when it comes to the Galway forward line, like every opposing manager has like serious questions to ask, because even taking their free scoring midfielder Paul Conroy out of the mix, you have Shane Walsh maybe top of the tree of who to worry about, Damien Comer, but then every other forward has contributed handsomely so far this year at some point. Patrick Kelly, Johnny Heaney, Kieran Malloy maybe slightly more kind of defensively orientated, but they have so many threatening players that, Kieran McGeeney's looking at his stock of defenders, and you might be wondering, they could use another one or two here. Who goes here? Who goes? You maybe pair someone up against Walsh and Comer, and you feel happy enough, but then you start thinking about who's on the rest of them.
Yeah, and I suppose in a situation like that, you can only identify one or two key threats. If you're trying to put out so many fires, you lose control of the game yourself. So, obviously, Mikey, I think maybe Aidan Foker probably track Damien Comer, and Damien Comer likes to go out around the middle, and Aidan Foker is probably quite comfortable to go out with him as well, and can possibly hurt you going the other way. And as regards Shane Walsh, that's probably the biggest dilemma maybe for McGeeney. James Morgan has been going very, very well, but again, Walsh likes to go out and around the middle of the park as well. Do you pass him off to somebody else, or do you just identify somebody to try and curtail him, because he's so good from a starting stand? Do you know what I mean? When he gets the ball, he can be very, very difficult to defend against. But I think, going back to Rory's point about a shootout, I think, if Galway go down the route of a shootout, they get their arses handed to them. I think it's been shown in recent years that defensively, if they go kind of man to man, they can get badly exposed. And I think they've learned the hard way in a couple of occasions, particularly probably against Mayo. And you have to give Joyce and his management team credit for identifying that they had to get themselves right at the back against Mayo to cut off that running game. And similarly, I think they have to approach Armagh in a similar vein, that Armagh will mix it up going forward. The movement in their forward line is excellent in the way Jason Duffy and Rian O'Neill can interchange and come in and out, and Rory Grugan, they have good top class forwards, and then you've got good ball players like Stephen Campbell that's making it happen around the middle. So I don't think Galway can afford to come with a template to really attack Armagh. I think they'll look at Armagh's strengths over the last couple of weeks and they'll say, right, we have to maybe close down that kicking game, stop them creating goal opportunities, and maybe, you know, at times try hit them on the counter attack, which they've done very well against Roscommon, particularly in the second half, because they do have good, strong runners and they do have pace to go back. And I think with Donegal showed up maybe a few chinks in the Armagh. Armagh will attack with numbers when they come forward, and if they don't get it in quickly, they will come forward. And, you know, Rafferty even comes up. They all will come up and they'll try and get themselves in a position. And I think some of the quick kick-outs that Patton got into the pockets of the half-backs and some of the turnovers, if you can get at Armagh before they reset, that's the chance to really go after them, because they do give you that opportunity. And if Galway can move that ball very, very quick, they'll have to get a foot pass in to get between the half forwards and half backs. That's where they can quickly get at Armagh. Donegal just didn't do it enough, in my view. They were just a little bit slow, but you could see that there was opportunities there for them. So I think, listen, it is going to be a fascinating game. I do think it will be high scoring, but I think Galway have to have their defensive cap on to possibly close down Armagh.
Yeah, if they do have their defensive cap on, Eamonn, is there a risk here that perhaps Armagh, off the back of the Donegal game and how convincing it was, they might be a little bit gung-ho? And is there a call when you get to an All-Ireland quarter-final in Croke Park to have a little patience? Perhaps, you know, one of those marauding wing-backs doesn't go forward, you know, your full-backs stay in the full-back line, and that, as Whelo pointed out, like, if you have a quick kick-out strategy, or if you turn over the ball more significantly, like, Armagh could leave themselves very exposed. And this isn't me trying to talk them out of playing the way they're playing, because I love to watch them, but Ciaran McGeeney's wily enough now. You think, okay, look, we put on a show against Donegal, perhaps now people are expecting us to keep up the Harlem Globetrotter stuff. Maybe we'll play a little bit more conservatively, and maybe we'll draw Galway out rather than being drawn out ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely, Mikey. And look, I agree with the lads. I think it's going to be possibly the game of the weekend. I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a brilliant game, whatever way the teams decide to go at it. I think with Armagh, they've got to possibly where they expected to be themselves, maybe via a different route, but it's from now on where decision making is going to come into us in the big games. So if Armagh have the opportunity to kick the ball inside, they prefer to do that, and they'll try and play that front foot football. If Galway have bodies in place, they should, you know, they should be a bit more patient, play the 1-2s, get the runners going and all that. So I think they'll absolutely be ready for Galway having plenty of bodies back there. How they deal with it will be the question. And are they mature enough as a team to make the right decisions on the ball, depending on what they're presented with? If they can get ahead of Galway and Galway have to come out and play it, allow them to kick the ball. If Galway are set, will they be patient? Will they play the bit of possession game? And that's where, you know, the likes of Dublin have that fantastic game experience, and they're very good at making the right decisions as a group of players. So I think that's going to be the interesting thing from the Armagh perspective this weekend. Can they make the right decisions in possession? I think they will keep a solid enough shape as well that they will be aware of the counter attack. There was one of the scores, I think again Ciaran highlighted it the night on the Sunday game against Roscommon in the day of the Connacht final, where Damien Comer was back helping turn over a ball in his own 45, and they counter-attacked, and he ended up kicking the point at the end of it. So they'll have looked at those scores and they'll be saying, you know, with Comer, with Shane Welch, with Rob Finnerty, they've plenty of pace going the other way, so that Armagh have to be very conscious of that Galway counter-attack. So they'll probably have a plan to deal with that as well. But I think a long-winded way of saying McGeeney will trust the players to make the right decisions on the ball. And we're going to see now, are they mature enough to do that? And if they are, they have a great chance of being in an All-Ireland semi-final and possibly further. If they don't, it'll be another season of possibly developing and learning for them.
See, you've sat on the fence there now, Eamon, so I'm going to have to ask you your most hated question. You're going to have to call it. Who's going to win it, Eamon?
I think this one, like, is there a possibility one of the 4 games could go to penalties this weekend?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised for extra time here.
Yeah. We could have that drama. Like with the 7 games we've left, I know the final can be a replay, but from now on, if a team loses on penalties, I know it's horrible always to lose in penalties, but when the big stuff is on, I don't know, Mikey. I've Ciaran Donaghy's obviously in the Armagh camp, and I'd be kind of rooting for Ciaran O'Neill in the Galway camp as well. So I'll give Armagh a hesitant nod. So
you're almost taking the fun out of this. I torture you so much by asking you for a prediction. You almost make me not want to do it. Whelo?
Yeah, it is a very, very tough one, Mikey. I just maybe there's one word that kind of springs to mind, maybe, and that's confidence. And I think Armagh are full of confidence at the moment, and all their players are probably performing to their maximum. And if they bring the same levels of energy that they had the last couple of weeks, and they don't hit a flat patch, I would give them the vote to scrape it, but it could go to extra time. Yeah, it's a very, very difficult one to call.
Okay, Rory.
Yeah, 90 minutes football obviously is going to be the kind of game that will require teams to dig deep into the reserves, and you'll be looking at your bench and your panel, and just looking at the likes of Jamar Hall, Connor Turbett, Mark Shields. Maybe Armagh have a little bit more quality there. Now, having said that, Shane, like, given the craziness that can sometimes exist with, especially when you have a goalkeeper who's not a goalkeeper, Shane Walsh could come out and bang 2 goals in after 5 minutes and change the whole complexion. So it's really hard to call, but yeah, 90 minutes football, we'll go the whole hog and Armagh to shade it.
Okay, well, I've already predicted Galway are going to win the All-Ireland, so I guess they have to win their quarterfinal if they're going to win the All-Ireland, so I'm going to stick with them. And no extra time here either. I think they could, I think this could be not relatively, but I think they could actually be quite impressive on Sunday. I'm going to stick with them. I'm keeping faith.
Colours on as well, Mikey.
Yeah, we're back to 2.
Oh God, it's more pink, honestly. No, I'm not going that far.
We're looking at a kind of a 2001 type performance, is it, Mikey?
Yeah, I think so. I was at that final. It stuck with me, I have to say. Maybe that's where my kind of ill-founded graw for Galway football comes from. Anyway. Since 2001, 2 teams have dominated a lot of football narrative, obviously, along with Dublin, and that is Kerry and Mayo.
I was wondering when you're going to start talking about the favourites for the championship.
Here we go.
Well, I'll start with you, Whelo. They are the favourites, and they have been since a ball wasn't kicked in January, I suppose, and they haven't done anything to dissuade. They won the league against today's opponents. And they beat what was put in front of them thus far this summer, namely Cork and Limerick.
The rumour mill is flying. We love rumours in Kerry. Normally,
I heard David Clifford has no legs now. He has no legs. They both just fell off.
Normally it was the O'Sheas fighting amongst each other, or they might have gave Jack a dig or something, wasn't it? No wonder you had to close the close the training sessions.
That was fact, Rory. That was the rumours are flying. I rang my mom last night and she was saying that her sister told her that David Clifford is definitely out. So there you go.
Well, if you have no legs, you can't play football. That's just the way it is.
Depends on who you talk to. Some people say he's fine, and other people. I hope obviously for Kerry's point of view that he's fit, but even from the point of view of the spectacle, and for the big picture for Kerry, if they do manage to win on Sunday. If he hasn't played, a competitive game going all the way back to the Cork game, that's not ideal for David himself. So I haven't heard for sure that he's out. So and Jack said he should be okay. So I'm going to go with that.
Whelo, this has all just been fueled by Jack O'Connor not giving a straight answer to a straight question. And now at this stage of our lives, should we really expect a straight answer to a straight question from Jack? I honestly think he's just done this for the crack.
I think there's a definition for that, isn't it? Cute tourism. That's what they call it down there.
Yeah.
Listen, like, you know, obviously if he's not playing, it's one massive less headache for James Horan. There's no doubt about that. But still, the Kerry forward line, the threat that it carries, you still certainly can't relax. And I don't think it really will radically change how Mayo will approach the game. And you know, Kerry, similar to Dublin, probably still some question marks and haven't had competitive games, you know, but the optics from the whole year certainly indicate that, you know, they're well organized. They've bringing a lot more physicality to the middle third, have a solid defensive structure they've committed to, and then have a forward line that would frighten the life out of you. So all those aspects are still there, and they're coming in against a Mayo team that Mayo are the great unknowns, really, aren't they? Like, you know, everyone is sitting back going, you know, they have such a good track record in performing when you write them off and not performing when you big them up. And they're coming in this weekend in that vein of not performing. So it's an intrigue, and people think they're going to throw, you know, they have to throw the kitchen sink at Kerry and bring a hell of a lot of intensity to the game. But I suppose, again, there's two things for me. I think when you look at coldly at the matchups, Mikey, and you kind of say, well, who's going to match up with David Clifford or Paddy Clifford or Shawnee O'Shea, and Mayo have great defenders. But when you look at the matchups at the other end of the field, there's nothing there that really frightens you from a Kerry perspective. You know, Cillian O'Connor's obviously back in there. Ryan O'Donoghue, we don't know whether he's going to play, but Cillian O'Connor may have lost a little bit of pace. He still has the smartness and he still has the intelligence, but that for me sticks out as a different threat at either end of the field. And I wonder, does James Horan, he's been very predictable, but does he need to do something different this weekend? And it'd be interesting in Eamon's views on this, but like, would he spook Jack O'Connor if he just stuck Aidan O'Shea in on the edge of the square, and actually, even if he put a couple of balls in the first 10 minutes and they didn't win it refocuses the Kerry management mindset and can distract them nearly, and it just offers something different. And I don't know, it'd be interesting in your views if you're back on the Kerry line and all of a sudden you see Aidan O'Shea going in on the edge of the square, it does spook you.
Absolutely, Ciaran. And I look, I've long felt that that's his best position, to be honest, and that if Mayo used him in there, he could be very, very effective as a target man. Maybe not as a huge scoring threat. He'd probably score more goals and points. But I think, like, if you did that for, you know, and I'm sure Kerry have planned for this. So we'll take Tadhg Morley's role, which has been very, you know, very important for Kerry all throughout the season so far this year. If Tadhg Morley is setting up for a traditional Mayo attack, he's runners. Playing as a sweeper further out. He's playing out, you know, from the top of the D out, because he's dealing with runners. His job as a sweeper is to deal with runners there. Whereas if you've Aidan O'Shea inside as a target man, he has to drop 20 yards deeper to deal with kicked ball inside, and it creates a bit of space outside for runners to come into. So straight away, even just with that little element of Tadhg's role, it changes the dynamic for him. So yeah, I 100% agree with you. Yeah, I do think, and look, James Horan would probably argue that his way of playing is effective, and that, you know, it has got them so far, but like, it hasn't won them the big games, as close as they have been, and Jesus, they've had misfortune and everything else. But I do think they need to come with something slightly different this weekend.
Yeah. And the other aspect of that, Eamonn, is though that it would allow, while you're really forcing Tadhg Morley to play deep, stay deep, it may allow Mayo to have that +1 in a not so deep position and be able to come forward and support the attack as well. You know what I mean? To be able to play as a sweeper but come forward when required, because obviously Mayo have to have somebody in to protect if Clifford's playing or the inside forward, because they left themselves so open in the league. They have to have a structure in their defence as well, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting that the implications of, like, you know, some people think I was very simplistic, say stick the big man on the edge of the square, but you're both explaining it there, that it has implications further at the field and for how the defensive team plays throughout. So it's quite interesting, because obviously this is one of those age-old arguments. But Rory, they have to do something, because like they may have beaten Kildare, but they were bloody awful for 65 minutes, and 2-7 of their 2-13 came from either the bench or the defence. So their attacking unit is not doing what it's supposed to do.
Don't they have a fierce knack, though, of either rising up to the level of the opposition they're playing and equally dropping down to the level of the opposition that they're playing? Mayo are just that funny kind of a team. I think they will bring everything. Should they've no choice, they'll bring everything on Sunday. And I think, look, I think I'd be a small bit worried about this game if I was Kerry. I mean, I think Whelo's spot on. Like, even if Clifford isn't playing, I think he will be playing. I don't necessarily see that as being a huge game changer, because Kerry have so many other areas in their forwards where they can hurt you. But I think from a Mayo perspective, if Ryan O'Donoghue is fit, if they picked a full forward line of Ryan O'Donoghue, Jason Doherty, and Aidan O'Shea, for example, and you've got some really good targets in there, might that allow you?
There's Ciaran O'Connor playing in that plan.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, well, I suppose he does. Obviously, he does start. I'm not so sure. I think he would you maybe hold him back at this point? I mean, I like, is he going to get found out again?
Ciaran O'Connor on the bench with Aidan O'Shea at full forward. Now that would be a dramatic plan, all right.
And I think they'd play him, Roy. They'd play him to play. He's too smart. He's too intelligent. He still leads. In terms of work rate, he still leads that line. That's true. And force them to work when they don't have the ball.
But he's chopped and changed his 6 forwards. Now he's chopped and changed all the ways through. James Horan, like I think you mentioned before, Whelo, he's looking to see if he can find something and stumble on something and see if he can find the right kind of magic formula. Whether it's this, I mean, is it platoon of wing backs playing in his defence? He's obviously chopped and changed quite a bit up front as well. Fellas in, fellas out. So, look, you just don't know what he's going to pick or what kind of a team is going to line out on Sunday. I think either way, I'd expect Mayo to come with everything. And I don't necessarily think they'll be that overawed. I mean, there are huge question marks still about Kerry, and until, I suppose, we all know what Kerry are judged by, and until, I suppose, they answer that by winning the ultimate, then those question marks will remain. So it's just about feeding into that, I suppose, from a Mayo perspective, and seeing if they can gain any capital from it.
Ever was it thus, Eamonn? I suppose really a Kerry team comes out of Munster, probably being favourites for the All-Ireland, since before the league started until the dawn of the current Dublin team, etc. But always the same questions that they won't be tested till they get to Croke Park, and any weaknesses that might be perceived. This is as big a part of an All-Ireland campaign for Kerry as anything else, really, isn't it? This notion that there are questions to be answered.
Oh yeah, look, absolutely, Mikey. Look, I think to be fair to Cork, up until maybe 2018, really, certainly 2017, maybe you could argue, Cork were always hugely competitive in Cork, and during my own playing career, they beat us more often than not in the Munster Championship. So I think in the past we would have been well road tested by the time we got to Croke Park for an All-Ireland quarter-final. But obviously the last couple of years that hasn't been as much of a factor. But yeah, look, ultimately with Kerry, until this group get it done, there are going to be question marks. It's as simple as that, and they know that themselves, and they're going to have question marks themselves within the group until they get it done. But they can only do it one step at a time. And I think even thinking back to the All-Ireland semi-final last year, there will have been a lot of hard lessons learned for the players themselves from that loss, and that kind of hurt and disappointment can be a ferocious driving force as well. So I imagine individually, whether as a group or not, I don't know if they are, but individually, some of the players that would have been disappointed with the way they performed against Tyrone last year, they'll certainly be tapping into that this week, and they'll be saying, not again. There's no way I'm gonna let the side down again like that in Croke Park. and that can be a very powerful thing. But yeah, look, the Kerry lads have to be bursting for this game. They have to be mad for Road, and they have to be mad for Croke Park and get out there and start really into the business end of the championship. And for that reason, I'd be quite hopeful for Sunday. But until the ball's thrown in, we won't know really.
Yeah, Whelo, the one area of real strength for Kerry, from what I can see, is the options that Jack O'Connor has. Be it if somebody's not performing in the first 10 minutes, he could take the Brian Lohan approach and hook them, because they have a bench. If David Clifford is back, say Killian Spillane drops to the bench, and just as an example, so you'd have Killian Spillane, Adrian Spillane, David Moore, Paul Murphy, Gavin Crowley, Micheál Burns, Dylan Casey, all these guys available. Like they're kind of getting to the strength of bench that we were discussing earlier about Dublin in their pomp. Like they've an awful lot of depth.
Yeah, and that's it, Mike, and that's so important when it comes to this stage of the championship. And I think listen, we saw evidence of that against Cork when they were able to. I think he had Guinea back that night, didn't he? And they were able to just roll Murphy and Moran in and absolutely. Totally, I know Cork were down a man, but dictate the last quarter. So that's a huge strength that Kerry have, and they can mix it up. And he can also probably mix it up. Will he start Adrian Spillane this week? Will they bring him in as a runner maybe to work hard? And because Mayo are going to go forward, I know you can sit back and say you want the Kerry forwards to pin back on McLaughlin and Paddy Durkin and Hession and these guys, but you do need somebody that's going to track runners and work hard. And I know against Limerick he went for a very offensive front six. He kind of wanted to blow them out of the water, and Killian Spillane had a great game, and he's probably competing with Tony Brosnan in the corner probably for a slot, but he might just put Adrian Spillane in this weekend just as a defensive half forward, and he'd still have a lot of threat up front with whoever the other five that he picks. So like Kerry have incredible depth, like all the ingredients are there. If Kerry get a good solid game this weekend and come through it, they will be in good stead, better stead, possibly coming into the semi-final.
Yeah, Rory, can you make it?
Is Dylan Casey gone for the? Is Dylan Casey gone? Eamonn, I think he's gone.
Yeah, he had to have a procedure in his ankle, I think. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay, down one.
Yeah, but sure, like they still have plenty more. But
your heart bleeds for them too, Rory. I'm sure.
No, my heart will never bleed for Kerry. You can be sure of that. But listen, look, they're in really good shape, I think. The only thing is, look, it's just, again, I mean, with Mayo, you just never know. I think the one thing, and we mentioned this after the last round of the qualifiers, I think Mayo, the one area that they will be able to match Kerry on is athletically. I think fitness-wise, I think that's where Cork probably couldn't live with Kerry, and that's where Cork ran out of juice. It's just, like, I think Mayo will be able to stay with Kerry full 70 minutes. It's just they probably just won't do enough damage on the scoreboard to ultimately win the game, and I think that's where Kerry will see it out.
Yeah, Eamonn, this is your chance to engage in that favourite of Kerry hobbies, if you want. Can you make a case for Mayo here, or is this like are Kerry, rightly the favourites to win this match?
I think Rory did it very well for me already, Mikey. So no, look, I think the thing with Mayo, Rory mentioned it, that they can play. They traditionally play to the level of the opposition. They won't be afraid of Kerry. They're going to absolutely go at it, hammer and tongs. The kind of game that they play with the runners from the back, that's a hard game for Kerry to deal with. Even within club football in Kerry, there's very few club teams in Kerry that play that kind of a hard running game from the back and generate momentum from there. So Kerry footballers don't come across that too much. So because of that, it is a hard game to deal with. Are the Mayo crowd going to travel this weekend? They've always been traditionally a huge factor in Kerry Mayo games, that when Mayo get momentum, they get behind them and they drive them on and they get energy from it. They didn't travel in huge numbers last weekend, and there seems to be a bit of apathy in Mayo this year for the first time in a long time. So if they travel in numbers and the team, play to the levels they can play, of course they're going to put it up to Kerry. Of course they're going to test them. For a parallel, I'd be looking more at the league game in March, which was a great battle that it was played in bad conditions.
The weather might be a bit better. No, actually, the weather's not supposed to be very good this weekend. So
Yeah,
it might be quite
exactly.
good.
Yeah, and Kerry's record, surprisingly, with the amount of rain, it's actually dry down here this morning, but with the amount of rain that we have in Kerry, our record in Croke Park on wet days in the recent past hasn't been great. So, like, there are plenty of things there for Mayo to get their teeth stuck into. So I think there's a huge appreciation in Kerry that we're expecting the, grade 1 Mayo rather than the Mayo we've seen over the last couple of weeks. If it turns out that Kerry win comfortably, fine, but I don't see it that way. I think it's going to be a huge battle. I'd still be quite hopeful that Kerry will do it and will do the business, but I think it's going to be a huge test, and it's going to be a big battle.
Okay, that's Eamonn going for Kerry. I'm going for Kerry. Whelo?
Yeah, I'm going for Kerry as well, Mikey. I agree with everything Eamonn says. I think that Mayo will throw the kitchen sink at them. They will up their performance. But for me, the threat of that Kerry forward line in Croke Park just still sticks out. And while they might rattle them and they could go ahead and they could be thereabouts for 50, 55 minutes, I just think that last quarter with the options Kerry have coming off the bench and with their firepower up front, I just think Kerry will have too much.
Rory, any fear of a Tyrone-style ambush here?
No, didn't think Kerry would be beaten all year. Now, I know that prediction went out the window when they lost to Tyrone, obviously, in the league, but I'm not too sure how interested Kerry were in that particular match. I don't think they're going to be beaten on Sunday, and I don't think they can be beaten. I think if Kerry were beaten, that's the one thing that you could maybe offer a little bit of succor to Mayo. Kerry are under pressure, like if they lose, my God, batten down the hatches down there for the winter months, So
put on the helmets.
Yeah, put on the helmets. And that does bring an element of pressure, Eamonn, doesn't it?
It does. But I would say, Rory, like, my experience always of that is the external pressure you don't really take any notice of it. But within the group, they'll certainly be putting pressure on themselves to perform this weekend. And I think that's the way they'll be looking at it. They'll be saying, look, lads, if we perform to the levels we're capable of, we'll win the match. But if we show up and we're a pale shadow of ourselves, we will be beaten. So I think they'll be putting pressure on themselves, but certainly, if they lose it the weekend, it'll be an
interesting
rather than a winter of discontent. It'll be 6 or 7 months of discontent. So Jack will be looking for the split season to be abandoned, I'd say, if that was the case.
At least there will be sport in Kerry during the months of August and September. It'll be Kerry inter-county football baiting. There'll be people on every street corner having a go. There'll be no shortage of activity, but I don't think it's going to happen, and I think we've all gone for a Kerry win there. So sorry, Mayo. All right, lads. I think we've previewed the All-Ireland quarterfinals as much as we could possibly preview them. So I say thank you to Eamonn and to Whelo and to Rory, and of course you can watch the 2 matches on Sunday on RTÉ, the 2 matches on Saturday are on Sky Sports, and you can listen to them on the radio on Saturday Sport and Sunday Sport on Sunday, obviously, because in the name. And we'll have live blogs, reports, reaction and everything on the RTÉ website and the RTÉ News app. And we will, of course, be back on Monday to rake over the coals of it. So until then, we'll say thank you, good luck, and chat to you then. Goodbye.
Crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh!